And now for our feature presentation.
Are you ready?
Streaming live around the world, this is Paper Cuts with Brad and Jay.
Hey, what a stupid question.
Oh, I've already had 2 glasses too of Tennessee whiskey.
Jay, you've done so good, and you have to muck it up right at the end. Jay's gray. He's all gray now. Look at his beard.
I got grayer, right? Everyone in the chat, thanks for stopping by and enjoying yourselves. We know you did. There's 3 legends here with us.
This evening we talk about The Rack with editor Tom Deady.
And he brought a whole gang of misfits with him.
Welcome to the show.
Hey there, happy Friday. Brand new episode of Paper Cuts. A lot of people here. Tight fit. Do we need to scooch in a little bit?
Scooch in, squeeze in, everybody. Yeah.
Elbow room and stuff.
No, I
Everything
just took
good?
a shower. So
Whose hand is that?
It's
That was
so
my
far-
hand.
we skipped it.
Is it Sunday? I usually don't shower until Sunday, but we'll get through it. Tonight we're talking about The Rack. Just look, it's a chunker. Nice anthology stories inspired
Yeah.
by vintage horror paperbacks. We have what, Brad, 20 stories in here? Did you
I think
count
there's
them all?
20 stories. Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't
And editor Tom Deady, you stopped by to talk about it, and you brought a whole gang of people with you. Do you want to go around the room and introduce your gang here?
Sure. I'm going to go around the horn the way I see them on my screen. So
Okay, go for it.
I got a little Brady Bunch screen going on here. We've got Larry Hinkle. Story is That Chemical Glow. And we've got Steven Van Samson, Looks Like a Scythe. Mercedes Yardley, I Am a House Demanding to Be Haunted. And we have Philip Fracassi with The Visitor.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And I know all of you had to be kind of talked into this. I don't know what the bribes were.
I'll do
We were-
anything.
Twisted.
We were not part of the bribe, so don't look for us for the checks or anything like that. But each writer with us tonight, they all have a deep body of work. We're going to try to focus on this, but I mean, feel free, any of you, to hop into your previous works too, so people in the chat can start buying all of your books, and you can make some sales and all that stuff. We'll go with it. Tom, I want to start off with you. Where did the concept of this come from? Was this like a pet project you were talked into? Where did the whole project start with?
Yeah, it's been kind of percolating for a while in my head. I've whenever I do panels and talk about why I became a writer, I go back to the time when I was about 13 and I went to my local Woolworths and I'm spinning The Rack, which every store used to have back in the day. And I came across this guy. Whoops.
There we go.
And, I took this thing home and I read it in a couple days and that was it. I was hooked. I wanted to write stories that made people feel the way this book made me feel. Took me my whole life to get there, but that's another story.
Are you there?
Not really, but I'm working hard, Larry.
Yeah. There we go. Look,
You're
got
there.
Bram Stoker on there. There we go.
Yeah,
Look at that.
thank you.
Right.
Larry's like my personal heckler. I bring him along everywhere.
Makes
no sense, really.
It doesn't make sense, but
I don't know.
yeah. So when I decided I want to do an anthology, Grady Hendrix played into it a little bit with his recent Paperbacks from Hell
Right.
book that brought a lot of focus back on those old glory days mass market paperbacks, and that's kind of where the idea came from, is to just put out an anthology that had that same vibe that you got from looking at those lurid covers on those mass market, the Tribe by Barry Wood and the old Girl Next Door, which for some inexplicable reason had a skeleton dressed in a cheerleader.
Yeah, skeleton.
It had nothing to do with the story, but so that's really where it came from, and it was kind of interesting trying to entice people to do the anthology without any real guidelines. It was basically like, you guys know the vibe I'm going for, right? that was my guideline. But luckily everybody got it, and they all came through with home runs, and the stories are all unique and fabulous in their own way. And yeah, I mean, my job was easy in all this. All I did was ask great writers for stories, and they all came through.
Well, speaking of that, since you were trying to get the vibe out there for the writers so they knew what you're talking about, what were the requirements? Was there anything in writing like, hey, this is what we need? Or was it just soft shell, try to fit it in this kind of genre?
It was very, very vague, I guess. It was basically like, hey, you remember all those books that used to have like creepy puppets and dolls and creepy kids and giant insects? I want stories like that. And that was essentially the nuts and bolts of the guideline there. That was it. I was completely open on length of stories. As you can see, there's some, like 2,000 word stories, and there's a 12,000 word story, I think, in there.
Yeah, I think Steve just put a whole novella in there for his, but we'll get to that. I was like, wow, this is like page 33. Okay, let's keep going.
I kept asking him, I'm like, Tom, this is getting really long. Are you sure? Is this really okay? And he's like, it's fine.
Yeah, but it's got the wheel bug. I mean, I didn't even know what that was until I read the story. And when I ever looked it up, I was like, holy shit, that thing is terrifying.
So you didn't throw out a word count max to them? Normally there's, when there's a call, it's like 5,000, 6,000 words, but you're like, just give me whatever. Or
I mean, I think I might have put like 2,500 to 8,000, but I said I'm not firm on any of this. I just want great stories.
Gotcha.
I tend to write short, so he gave me a minimum.
You have to at least 10 words, Larry. 10 words.
That's right.
Not counting your name and title. Okay.
In the title.
And the end.
Right.
So was it all invite, or was it open submissions at all, or did you invite everybody?
This one was all invite. I'm planning a second volume, which I'm going to leave a few spaces open for an open call.
Nice.
I've already got a pretty nice lineup started for the second volume.
Okay.
Cool. And I have to ask, so you've got, Stephen King in here has a story. How did you pull that out? Did you have to break someone's arm to get that in there?
I think I've heard of him before.
No, right? So you just held up Haven. Haven was originally published as a limited edition hardcover through Cemetery Dance.
Okay.
And I kept in touch with Mr. Chismar over the years since that's been out, and basically begged him. I originally asked him if he could sweet talk King into writing an intro for the Rack. And when he was done laughing, he said, no, but I could probably get you a reprint. So he gave me the people at Simon & Schuster, King's people, to talk to. And I had no say, believe it or not. And what I just said, hey, I'd love to get a reprint and drop Richard's name. And whenever they sent me the Rack, the Raft, I'm sorry. I couldn't believe it, because that is the perfect story to fit into this anthology.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it was
that
a little
6
degrees of separation. So
yeah.
I try not to call in too many favors from Richard, but this one was definitely worth it.
That kind of answers Amy's question about why you included the Raft by King. That's just the one they sent.
It was luck of the draw, and I couldn't be happier about it.
And I mean, King's a up and coming fresh writer to the business, so you're doing your job of getting him out there, getting that name.
Yeah, I'm trying to get.
It's really nice of you, Tom.
There.
Yeah.
It's what I do. Yeah.
So for each of you writers, when you were approached with this concept, how did you handle it? What was your approach? Did you have ideas right away? Did you have some in the bank, some stories ready to go? Mercedes, let's start with you, since you have the awesome matching blue hair with our logo.
Yeah, totally. So that I can match the logo.
Yeah.
Well, kind of like looking at this room, there's something different about me, like being the only woman here. Being in the book, I have a very different style than what I felt that Tom was looking for. And I was kind of like, are you sure you want me to do this? Because I'm very whimsical and language in the Rack. like my first rack book was The Keep by F. Paul Wilson,
Okay. Yeah.
and I read it cover to cover and it finally fell apart, and just a different style than what I have. So I was afraid that, at first I kind of tried to fit in a little bit more to what I felt the rack would be. And I was like,
Mhm.
this just isn't working. And I thought, Tom has faith in me as me. So I just sat down and wrote something. I wrote one called I Am a House Demanding to be Haunted, which is kind of a haunted house story in reverse. And it just felt more like me. And I sent it to Tom and I'm like, this might not fit. And he's like, probably not, but I'll take it. So, so it was something
Yeah,
completely new for me.
If you guys haven't read that particular story, when you do read it, you'll know why I took it. It probably, like Mercedes said, it probably doesn't fit what the traditional rack type story is, but at the same time, Mercedes, I can visualize a cover that goes with that.
Yeah.
That would fit
for sure.
perfectly on the rack.
Thank you.
But yeah, the story is just so beautifully written. There's no way I could say no to it.
Yeah, I did see. I did feel it was a little different in the other ones we read for the show here. Yeah, for some reason, the Dreamweaver song was in my head the whole time I was reading. I don't know why. It was like I just kept stopping and singing Dreamweaver for some reason. But
I love that. So that's great.
I told when I read your story, when I read your story, I told Jay that, like I said, I really liked your story, but I told him it felt like more like a Victorian type of ghost story in a way, like Shirley Jackson or something. Which still, it's really good. But yeah, it did feel different, but not in a bad way. It didn't feel like, oh, this is out of place. It shouldn't be in here. I've really enjoyed it, but it broke up the tone a little bit from, all the 80s pulpy stuff, and yours is quite different.
Yeah, and I knew it would be a little bit different, but I feel like it does fit in. It stands out, but it fits in. It's not like I'm taken out of this whole novel.
Oh yeah.
Drag me out and shoot me. But yeah, so I just wrote something completely fresh, a completely new idea for it, and I love that story. So thank you, Tom, for inspiring that. I dig it a lot.
Before we get to the others, is that your style of writing for those who are discovering you? Okay.
Very lyrical, very kind of ephemeral, I guess, in a way.
Okay.
A lot of murder. But yeah.
A lot of murder.
A lot of murder. They call me Miss Murder.
I was going to say your website actually has your nickname up there. So
yeah. They call my husband Mr. Murder, which is just kind of hilarious because he's so buttoned down finance guy, and he's like, hey, Mr. Murder, and he's like, yes, what? Yeah, sure.
Like out in public at the grocery store, Mr. and Mrs. Murder over here.
Right? Well, yeah, at church, whatever.
At church.
Yeah. Family reunions and.
Amy in the chat says she just finished her story. It's very ethereal, and she really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you so much. Nice. I like that story.
Yeah,
it's perfect for Christmas Eve,
isn't it? Though?
Yes, it is. It is. Yeah, like I said, it's got that Victorian kind of feel to it.
Yeah,
it's perfect for a Christmas time ghost story.
Yeah. That's one of my. The Christmas ghost stories are some of my favorites. That's kind of where. Yeah.
Philip, not to put you on the spot, I know you're a little sick, but tell us about yours. Like, where did yours come from? Was it one you had in the bank, or was it fresh for the book, or?
So it was sort of one I had in the bank in the sense that I'd written it I think I had written it only maybe a few weeks before Tom invited me. Okay. So it wasn't like it was sitting around for years. I had written it for initially for my patron, and I think it was like maybe even it was very, very soon after I finished it that Tom messaged me, and at that point I usually have 3 or 4 stories sort of in the bank, as it were. Just because I like writing, I'll have an idea and I want to write it, and then I kind of will move on and do something else and sort of forget about it for whatever, or I'll use it for a patron or whatever. But when Tom invited me, like he said, I immediately got what he wanted to do. Yeah. I think I had I kind of went to see what I had. I had like 3 or 4 stories written, like I mentioned, and I had a bunch of ideas for some stuff I wanted to write over the next couple months. And but what I liked about this particular story, which is called The Visitor, is that I really liked the idea that it caught kind of at least for me as a writer, Amityville horror vibe.
Okay.
and that was something I thought was very applicable to what Tom was trying to do. He mentioned the raft, the Stephen King which I didn't know. Tom was very interested that's what they gave you because it's a perfect story for the anthology. That pulpy, really old school horrors. So that also was like very easy to kind of write a comp for. So, but yeah, I liked it because like I said, it has sort of an old school vibe. It's sort of an Amityville horror vibe, but it kind of turns it on its head a little bit. And I love writing old school horror stuff. That's kind of, for a good chunk of my work, it's sort of the sandbox I play in, that kind of 80s, 90s horror, vibe. So it was pretty easy for me to just, most of my stories would probably, a majority of the stories I've written probably would have fit into the anthology. But that's why I like The Visitor, because like I said, I just felt it was perfect. It kind of reminded me of a movie you'd see on late night cable television when you were, in the basement and 13 and some creepy movie came on about a priest visiting a house.
Right.
And so that was why. And I don't remember what the original inspiration for the story was. I think it was, if memory serves, I had an idea about, I don't want to give anything away, right? So I had an idea about a priest that went to exorcise a house and kind of, well, I don't know, suppose spoiler alert, I don't know, but it kind of became part of the house and became part of the haunting. So that was kind of, I think, the original idea that just popped into my head one day, and The Visitor was sort of the outcome of that idea.
I know there are two different like time periods, but I feel like that story could be in the same world as Boys in the Valley, like that religious type horror.
Yeah. It has that kind of, right, the priest vibe. This is definitely strong. Obviously, yeah, different periods of time. But I think in my head, The Visitor takes place like in the 70s or 80s. But yeah, definitely some religious horror in the sense of there's a lot of good banishing evil, but there's a little misconception as to what the evil is, and again, it's an impossible story to talk about without spoiling it. So but yeah, it just kind of turns some of the kind of the tropes on its head a little bit, and hopefully surprises readers and gives them a nice little fun 20 minutes of reading experience.
I was gonna say, it's short enough. So do you want to go ahead and read it? I'm joking. I know you're sick.
While you're sick and coughing.
Yeah, I'd get through it. It would take me a while. But yeah, it is short.
It's always hard.
It's like 30. It's like about 3,000 words, I think. 3,300 words, something like that. So it's not too.
I think it was
short, but yeah.
I think it was like 12 pages or something in the book is what it came out to. So it's wasn't too long. It's always hard to talk about a short story without spoiling it too. It's always hard.
Well, especially this one, because it is kind of it's built on twist. But it's kind of interesting, sometimes sometimes because most of my short stories actually end up going longer, going 10,000, most of my story ends up being around 10,000 words.
Right.
But sometimes you kind of want to, because sometimes you want to get in there and you want to sort of, mess around a little bit. You want to get into the characters. You want to get more into the world. And sometimes you just kind of want to like get in there and get out. So this was one of those kind of get in there and get out kind of stories, where I didn't want to let the reader off the hook. I wanted it to be, from page one on, you had to turn the page to see what happened next. So that was kind of
definitely good pacing throughout, because I think if you would have added more to it, there would have started to be like a disconnect, because it would have been kind of overkill. I think it was perfect length actually for it, with a good pacing.
It's just a kind of, like I said, you get in and you get out. You set up the characters as quickly as you can. Then I think part of you don't want to overstay your welcome on some of the setup, because you really want to kind of get to the setup and then get to the punchline. So so it was just, every story is a little different in that sense, but this one was that kind of story.
Steve, what about you? Where'd yours come from? What's yours about? And
Steve was like, "I'm not getting there quick. I'm going to drive you along for the long haul."
I was going to ask that. Yeah. Yours was a 2-day read.
Yeah, well, you know,
we're busting your chops, but
So-
yours is a really good story.
It is. Yeah.
oh, thank you very much. Yeah, so you know, they're busting my chops. It is over 9,000 words, so it's a longer story. I don't have the 12,000. If there's a 12,000, it ain't me. But but it's pretty like for a short story.
No, that was Nunnally. I apologize.
Oh, it was Nunnally. Yeah, but I mean, for a short story, that's crazy. You know, I mean, most, you know, for those who don't know, like most open calls, like they want sometimes 3 to 5. 7 is like pretty cool, but like not all the time. And usually it's not more than 7. So, you know, I kept checking. I'm like, are you sure? You sure? But this, so my stuff, I always work, you know, as writers, we always, you know, we have our fingerprint, right? So my fingerprint is kind of like, in part, there's a lot of diversity. I always fit in to the forefront with my characters. That's always one of the things I'm always thinking about. But I try to like not really talk about it too much. So it's like it's there, and because I don't think it should be the point of the story or anything, like so I like, but I always want to do that. So, you know, there's that, and then there's this biology angle. I love animals and bugs and all sorts of stuff like that. So a lot of my things have monsters, but really I work them out as like creatures, like living things, you know, because my favorite movie monsters are like, you know, the ones that feel biologically possible. Like the Xenomorph's one of my favorites, but that's like the one I give the pass to. Like most of the stuff that I love, like I like the Tauntaun. Tauntaun's my favorite Star Wars character. Like forget Luke and Han. Like I just like the Tauntaun. But like, you know,
what's that, a movie? What's the Star Wars you're talking about?
Don't get this. Don't indulge him, Steve.
It's
just move on.
It's, real quick, kangaroo. It's like the kangaroo camel from Empire Strikes Back in the beginning on the snow planet. Anyway, so I've been wanting to like write about a monster wheel bug, as Tom mentioned earlier, for like ever. It's like I wrote 2 books that will never get off the shelf. They were the first things I ever wrote, like back in like, you know, between, I don't know, around like 2005, 6 or something like that. Like when I was just like sort of learning, and you know, the first ones are terrible, but you got to do them. And I really wanted to do a wheel bug in that story. And I wanted to do a giant wheel bug. And they're so for you guys that don't know, they're these horrible insects that they basically have like a hypodermic needle for a mouth that is tucked under the neck, and they can like reach out and like stab into their prey, and they brundle fly it all up, and they liquefy it, and then they just slurp. And they're really, really crazy looking, right? And they're of a group called assassin bugs. And there you go. And there's all different assassin bugs, but the wheel bug has this like gear looking crest on the back. It's like a shark fin, but a gear, or like a saw, like a circular saw blade. It kind of looks like. I mean, it's so metal. It's like the most metal bug of all time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely nuts. So I had this idea that like, well, what if the monster version of it has that crest, but it's like cymbals, you know, like drum cymbals. So they look like it's one piece, but in fact there's a little separation there. So when it wants to, it can rattle them, and that's a sound that it makes. So I had this. I wanted to make the rattleback forever. I've wanted to do the rattleback forever for like, you know, 15 years or something. And when Tom brought this up, I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, can I do a giant bug story? Do you know what a wheel bug is? And he's like, no. Holy shit, they're awful. I'm like, I know. And so anyway, so there we have the basic story, and they're you know, the main character is a forest ranger, and I knew nothing about what it would be like to be a forest ranger, and I didn't want to bullshit. So I set about the task of like contacting some forest rangers. So I just like literally Googled, and I found a lady eventually in Oregon who actually emailed me back. And it was really, really cool. So I got to like interview her, and she told me a bunch of stuff and what it was like. Because I'm like, well, what would happen if like this situation presents itself? Like, what do you do? Like, do you even carry a gun? Like, I have no idea. I'm stupid about this. I don't know. And this is why I'm always saying this on podcasts. I do not subscribe to the write what you know, like mantra. I think it's always the best to write what you don't know, but to learn about that thing first. Don't guess. Don't guess. Because there's already enough like make believe nonsense. We got a wheel bug thing, like the size of a panther. So like,
you're saying your story is educational too. We can learn.
You know what, Jay? I certainly hope so.
Yes, somebody's going to learn about this. Yeah,
I certainly hope so.
And like 80s horror, that's like perfect for giant bugs. That's like one of the first thing I think about with vintage paperbacks is like usually religious horror and giant bugs.
I mean, 50s is where I went. Like, I just love the black and white atomic age 50s giant bug movies. Yeah. So like, Them and Tarantula are my two favorite. Them with an exclamation point. You gotta
scream.
Them. It's like wham. It's the same thing. Them.
When you see the
they
shadow
earned
of the strings, and
they earned it.
Those are the best. Yeah.
Yeah.
And your main character, the Forest Ranger, I just finished watching the new season of True Detective. So I pictured Jodie Foster as the main person the whole time. That's who I was picturing in my head. Yeah.
I wrote the entire story with my friend, who is not a park ranger, in my head the entire time, and my friend Danielle, and I told her afterwards, I'm like, I wrote this entire story. I know that you've never done any of this stuff, but this is you. And she's like, oh, thanks. Like, people don't, if you're friends with a horror author, like, you never know what'll happen. It might end badly. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. We're going to use you as we see
the story. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, it was fun. It was a fun story to write, and the research was fun. And thanks to Tom for letting me write something that was so stupid long.
He's just thinking never again. That's all. Larry, let's wrap it up with you and your story here.
Well, I guess how I got in is a little different. Tom and I are in a writing group together, and he had read an early version of this story, and he contacted me and said, "Hey, I'm putting together this anthology. I really like what's going on there, but could you just make it like not suck?" So I just made it suck less, and then
I don't remember this conversation at all. It's an environmental. I don't know how you would classify it. Environmental, chemical, industrial horror story. These two twin brothers who come back from the war, and they have a drug deal that goes bad, and they're on the run, and they end up in their old neighborhood. That has been condemned because of a couple chemical spills, and something has taken up residence in the old neighborhood, and it's eager to make some new friends.
Yeah,
I guess that's a good summation. That's way better than last time on a podcast. I totally fucked it up. I gave it all away. I gave spoiler away and everything.
Well, at least mention the rat. The rat's got too many teeth for his mouth.
So. The rat, with too many teeth. I liked him.
Yeah. See, that was what I blew it, because when we were on a big kickoff party, a launch party, and that was going to be a trivia question Tom had, and I gave that away. So can't do that trivia question now. Larry just blew it. So it was a fun story. The only downside about being in this anthology is that mine is the story directly after Stephen King's story. So
I never even thought of that. Yeah.
I kind of feel bad for the readers who are reading this like classic The Raft, and they're like, okay, Larry, okay, whatever.
Well, you could have done it differently. You could have said it got better as the anthology went on.
That's right. It gets better.
Yeah,
I could have. I opt for truth.
I will say this.
It's awesome. All the stories in there are great. I mean, there's so many people in there. I've because I haven't been writing all that long, and so many people I've looked up to forever, and it's just really cool to see my name in a table of contents with these folks. So, and it seems like people have actually liked the story. Yeah, that's always a plus too.
Yeah, that's what Amy just said in the chat. It was super fun. She wants to know more about the characters.
They're probably dead now.
I knew it. I knew that was
Spoilers,
coming.
Larry. Come
Don't
on, Larry.
tell them that.
I said probably.
It's gonna be a part 2 now for it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, though. You tricked me. I spoiled again.
Yeah. Have
So
all
I-
of you
I
read
guess-
each other's stories in this?
Sorry, go ahead. I didn't hear that, Jay.
I'm sorry. Have all of you read each other's for the writers of the stories? Have you read the other stories in the book, or is this new to you too? Knowing about
Most of them. I'm not all
Okay.
the way through it yet.
Yeah, I'm about part way.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't read all of them.
I only
Well,
asked because
thanks,
we did a anthology for a while back, and me and Brad were talking about each story. And we had 5 or 6 people on here.
No one had read any of it.
No one had read it. The others, they were just like looking. They didn't even have an arc. They were just looking at us like we're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, did you not read this?" So I thought I'd double check this time.
Yeah, I rarely read anthologies that I'm in. I mean, for I don't know for whatever reason. I don't read a lot of anthologies, to be totally honest. But I read more short story collections and novels. But I don't think I've ever read. I don't think I've ever read any of the anthologies that I have a story, and because I certainly don't want to reread my story. And I think I just kind of, I don't know. I always feel like it's like one. I don't know. For whatever reason, it's in my mind. It's like a book that I was part of, so it's, I don't know, I just kind of dismiss it and I read other stuff, but it's actually probably not the worst idea to read other people's work.
That reminds me of like the actors that won't watch their own movies. I think like Johnny Depp does that. He won't watch his own movies.
That's very much what it is for me. I have definite performance anxiety. I've never listened to any of my audiobooks. No, thank you. No interest.
Same.
Yeah, no, it's because you just criticize Mercedes, right? You just criticize yourself the whole time. You're like, oh, why did I write it that way? So after like 5 minutes, you're like, screw it. No, I'm good. Mm-hmm. But yeah, but that's at least for some reason, anthologies. I've never read them.
So I'm curious, is that different for you? Is that different for you than like you going back and reading through your story while you're like editing it and writing it? When it's out in the world, you don't want to have anything else to do with it then?
Well, yeah, because once it's out there, you can't fix it. So
can't change
I don't want to look at it. I mean, plus you look, by the time, for example, Boys in the Valley was published, I probably read that book 20 times.
Right.
Probably sick of it by then.
Oh my God. There's a reason that you need other people to read your work, because when you're editing or trying to fix something or whatever, because by the time it even gets to an editor, you've already read it. A, you wrote it, and then B, you probably read it 2 or 3, at least 2 or 3, 4 times. So you miss everything. You miss detail because you just have, you're too close to it. So it's really good to have other people read stuff at that point and tell you what you did wrong. But no, once a story is published or once a book is published, that I never look at it unless I have to do a reading or something. Obviously, then I'll read from it. And even when I do a reading, I'll find myself correcting things in the book. I mean, like fixing that just so the next time I read it, it'll be better.
Yeah.
Do you all do the same thing with your short stories? Do you read them multiple times before you send them off to the editor or anything, or for all of you all?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're professional, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to, here's that rough draft, Tom. And he'd be like, ooh.
So you'll have the same kind of process, regardless of short story, novel, novella, kind of the same process for all of y'all.
I've never written a novel, so I don't know.
Well, what's amazing about it is that you can read something that has gone through me as the writer, call it 10 times, probably gone through an editor has read it twice, another proofreader's probably read it, and you will still find errors. And it's very frustrating because you think like there's only so much you can do. But I mean, I've read Stephen King books that have had errors in them, and so it's so it's just one of those things. So you definitely have to go through as much of the process as possible and get as many eyes on it as possible, because it's really surprising what some people will find and some people won't. But yeah, definitely something you have to do before it hits the streets, as it were.
I think, to to comment on that, like, you know, whether or not you read your own stuff. I don't think I'm quite as adverse to it as Philip, but I think there is like a life cycle to it because, you know, like you said, you know, you're writing something, you're going to read it 20 times. And I sort of hit that final read where I know it's the final read, you know, it's like, okay, I need to be done. We'll stick the fork right in there, and that's where it goes. And then you sort of mentally commit to it, and you're like, okay. And then, okay, it's going to go through some more rounds of edits and all that good stuff. So then, you know, so you got a couple more times with it. But once it's done, and you're going to, you know, you've moved on to the next thing. So I have gone back to read stuff, but it is always with a lot of like trepidation because like of those reasons. You think you're going to hate it or find all these things wrong with it. And there have been a couple of times where I've read something and gone like, oh, this isn't so bad. And I'll be like, what was I so afraid of? You know? And I'm like, this is okay. No, I like this. This is fine. This is good. Okay, cool. But like, it is scary. It is scary because I haven't read my first two novels, which came out in 2017, since probably 2017 or 2000. Yeah, pretty much. And I am legitimately terrified to ever read them again.
Well,
so I totally, I do really understand, you know, what Philip said.
Well, that was probably a few years ago. So like if you read them now, you're gonna, you know, be really be your own editor and like want to change everything and want to re-release the redux.
Right. Well, you know, I did that on my collection. I just it came out in February, and I put the very first story I sold in there, and I'm like, oh shit, I'm editing myself. This is much better now. The version that people will read in the collection is much better than the version I sold 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, and it's a time issue too. I mean, I love my books that have come out, my novels. I love them. I love them a lot. But I don't have the time to go back and reread them because I'm doing new ones and new ones and new ones. You know, if you put out a lot of work, it's just kind of a time suck. It's like, you know, do you remember that ex-boyfriend I had that was so wonderful? Let's reminisce. It's kind of like that in a way. There's a time when you just need to look forward, you know? So I'll go back and like if I'm reading for something, doing a reading for something or like adapting it for something else, but just like, I wonder what, you know, I just want to kick around and read my first novel. I don't have time to do that, you know, because we're also reading other people's books for blurbs and back covers and, you know, things like that. It just, my work falls to the wayside, you know, reading for my own work for pleasure. It just kind of feels, I don't know, just a little, not selfish, but like, let's look at my prom pictures and see how cute I was. You know what I mean? Like, I can move on.
Right.
Did you have that fan come up to you like, remember that first book, that one part? You're like, yeah, but not knowing what happened really. And it's kind of like, you know, when you see a face and you can't place a name with it. So
Tom did this cool thing at the launch party where he was like reading like parts of people's books and people were guessing, and he read like, oh, here's this, you know, part of a story, and I'm like, that is really pretty writing, and then I'm like, wait, that sounds like me. Is that me? And then it was me.
Yeah.
I don't remember that, but it resonated.
That is good.
That's some good shit right there. Oh, wait.
Pretty turn of phrase. I feel that same way. Wait. So yeah, there is that. People bring things up and it's like, yeah.
Well, at least it wasn't the opposite. It wasn't like, man, that's garbage, whatever he's reading right now. It's horrible. And then find out it's yours, you know. So
like, I knew it. I knew it all along.
Yeah.
And then like Larry was saying, you know, the story he wrote 10 years ago, you know, you're not the same writer now as you were 10 years ago. So you're never, if you're looking back at your old stuff, it's never going to be probably living up to what you would expect now. So you're always going to be one to correct it and change it from whatever back then. So it probably
Which
never
is
be
good,
perfect
right?
in your own eyes. Yeah.
That's good. You want to be
it's better than it was. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Hopefully we're improving.
Yeah. Tom, you mentioned that this was all invite. Did you have any input on the stories? structurally or anything at all when you were receiving the stories from everyone, or did you just go with what they wanted to go with and just kind of did the grammar editing and all that stuff?
Yeah, no. Other than I gave King a few pointers on the raft, but other than that,
of course, yeah.
No, I just did, and honestly, everything I got was very clean anyway. Very little editing, but so this is my first gig editing an anthology, and I'm sure everybody will say, yeah, that's obvious, but I didn't really want to change anybody's story. And I know some editors have a lot of input and like to kind of nudge the story in a certain direction, or, make changes to a character's arc or something like that. But I don't know. I really respect what the writers gave me, and I didn't want it to really change anything.
Yeah.
Was that for everyone who
thanks,
submitted?
Tom.
Is that different for you authors? Is that not normally how it works for y'all for like short stories at least?
Actually, Tom changed my story a lot. I don't know. It just depends. Some editors want to change quite a bit, and some say this is great. Just take out a period here or there.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like by this point, people that invite us know who we are and what we write, and they kind of are usually looking for a certain voice or something that they know that we'll give them.
Right.
So not a lot of changes. They know what to expect by now. So pretty untouched for the most part, which is nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been pretty lucky with that as well.
So is that true, Tom? You know about Mercedes' work and Larry's work and Philip's work and everyone's work that's involved?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I tell the story about Mercedes all the time. My very first StokerCon was 2016 in Vegas, and I was a newbie. I didn't know anybody. I think I sat with Larry. Did I sit with you? I'm sitting there with Larry. I didn't know anybody, and I'm like, oh, cool. There's an awards dinner, and I'm watching the awards, and Mercedes won her Stoker for, was it Little Dead Red?
Little Dead Red, yeah.
And she went up and she made her speech, and she was at the table next to me, and she came back and she's just holding the trophy and tears are streaming down her face, and I'm like, wow, this is a big deal. Like, this is really cool. And I went out and read her stuff and other people's stuff. But yeah, everybody I invited with a purpose, because I knew what their work represented and what I could expect to get from them.
Cool.
Do you guys want to see it?
Yeah, they're so
man.
beautiful.
That's what they look like. They're little haunted houses with doors that open, and
so it's got your name in the door, right?
Too.
Yeah,
they are super heavy too.
I'm waiting for the story that somebody uses one as a murder weapon, because
show it again. Show it again. There you go.
There you go. Open the little door. Come on.
Yeah,
full show. Door. It's got the
That's
name
so cool.
of the story in there.
I have 2 of them now. We put them up with our Christmas villages.
Nice.
So we always do a little.
So cool. So cool. That is really impressive, Mercedes. But I have something here that I think you guys will be impressed by.
Is it a bug?
Kleenex.
It's a box of tissue. look at the texture, the design. That's great.
Well, that's a name brand, Kleenex? Wow, that doesn't say Kroger brand or anything.
Yeah,
that's because I get paid by.
What do you have?
I get paid by Tom Deady. That's why.
Okay.
I want to see
Nosferatu Imperial Red.
Oh,
there you go.
That's badass.
So, can I see everyone's favorite thing that's on your desk or where you are? Can we have show and tell for a second?
I already did.
That was it.
That was it.
Right down in the basement right now.
I've got a little skeleton down here.
Yeah, I see your skeleton.
I don't know.
Technically, you guys aren't going to believe this, but I actually have a 1991 Batman Returns Batmobile.
Wow.
Nice.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. This is the one I had when I was a kid, and it is clearly very dusty now that I take it out. My goodness. Whoa. It's just, yeah.
That is awesome.
There's a tiny plastic Michael Keaton still in there, I think. Hold on. Yeah.
That's great.
Here you go. I found something that I can share. This is my Flash Gordon.
Oh, Flash
Oh,
Gordon.
awesome.
Nice.
Awesome. There he is.
My Flash Gordon Funko. I've also got a Pennywise Funko.
I have a Pennywise. It's up in my office though. I was banished to the basement tonight.
I've got a Pennywise one, and my daughter she's sick. She is terrified of Pennywise. So she comes in here and just stares at it and just runs out of the room all the time. It's super funny.
Yeah, if you want to break her of that, show her the second chapter 2, and she won't be scared anymore.
Yeah, that
she just laughs at the whole time.
Chapter 2 is
her
terrible.
Yellow raincoat.
Oh,
it
is
all the time.
Oh,
Make her wear that yellow raincoat just to put a target on her back.
She's watched like the first 5 minutes of the newer one, and she's like, "No, I'm done."
As soon as my I have a friend, and as soon as he said that Bill Skarsgård's impression, like his voice that he does for Pennywise, as soon as he said he's just doing Winnie the Pooh, it broke the entire thing for me. And I'm like, oh my God, he's literally just doing Winnie the Pooh. I wish he never said that.
I have
Steve, why did you say that, Steve?
Yeah,
shame on you.
because viruses spread. And, I mean, you can cry about it, but you got to move on.
Winnie the Pooh is his own horror, you know.
Oh, now, yeah.
He is now.
Robin in real life, didn't he end up like taking his own life because of the pressure of being Christopher Robin? I mean, it's dark. All that's dark. I just brought the room down again. I love that. It's my favorite thing.
Mrs. Murder.
Happy Friday to you. Yeah.
Here, Amy has a question for all of you all. She wants to know how long everybody's been writing horror. Larry, we'll start with you up at the top.
Oh gosh, probably this time around 10, 12 years, not that long. I mean, when I was younger, I wanted to be a writer, and I took a creative writing class at the Ohio State University, my alma mater. And,
man.
The class was set up. It was kind of like the Borderlands method, where you just sat there and everyone just ripped your story to shreds, and you weren't allowed to say anything.
Yeah.
And I was just a little kid at the time, and it crushed me so badly that I quit writing for 30 some years.
Oh wow.
And I'm a copywriter in an ad agency, so now I'm used to getting, because 99% of the stuff you present doesn't get picked. It just gets, now we hate that. And so I got used to it. I got a much thicker skin. So probably about 10, 12 years ago, I finally said, I'm going to start writing again. And so, not all that long.
So that's why when Tom Deady says this sucks, make it suck less, you're like, okay, no, I understand that. We're speaking the same language here.
Yes, it's like my boss. Except the thing is, I own the company now, so I'm actually saying that to myself. It's really good, Larry, except it sucks. So,
Mercedes, what about you? How long have you been writing horror?
Probably about 15 years. I think I started writing about 15 years. I mean, as a kid, but like submitting things about 15 years. That seems like a really long time.
But you've got a Stoker. You got 2 Stokers out of it, so.
Yeah, and a dagger too. A stabby award.
A stabby award.
Yeah, that one's fun.
Is it actually called a stabby?
Yeah.
Oh
wow, look at that.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
What is that?
Yeah, I haven't heard of that one.
That is really cool.
I got this one from Reddit, actually. Reddit can't agree on anything, but they agreed that I won a knife for a apocalyptic contest in Nuclear Lulu. It's a
wow.
But yeah, so it just came in the mail, and it's sharp, but I would still hit someone with the Stoker before I'd stab them with this, because that Stoker is.
Yeah.
Well, that's the 1-2 combo. You hit him and then you stab him in the gut.
I think I would probably stab them first and then hit them myself.
Okay.
But,
Steve, how long have you been writing horror?
So I have been writing horror since about 2016, and like I said, I did put out 2 books in 2017. So it's basically the first one is The Bone Eater King, and it's my vampire post-apocalyptic vampire story in Africa, kind of just like my own take. And then I wrote a sequel called Marrow Dust, and I've been kind of just on the path ever since. But I did, I stray and do different stuff. I've tried doing dark fantasy. I've tried doing humor and stuff, and horror is definitely the center. It's definitely my true north. I did want to mention Zach Graham left a really cool comment for us in the chat there. I really just thanks Zach. That's really, really cool. I wanted to make sure everybody got to see that.
Yeah, it says, as an indie author, this has been incredibly insightful, even more so for someone also putting an anthology together for the first time. Huge thanks, guys. Looking forward to reading The Rack.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Awesome, man. Good luck with that. Absolutely. Stick with it.
Is it an open call?
Larry's like, I got a story for you. So I got a story.
And if you don't like it,
yeah.
And if it sucks, you can just tell him to make it suck less. It's fine.
All of you are invited for his anthology right now. So
yeah.
Tom, what about you? How long have you been writing horror?
That's a hard question to answer. So like Larry, I was, I always knew I wanted to be a writer, and I never followed through. And so Haven was kind of written over a period of about 15 years. I actually started writing Haven in like 1997 probably. And I took a mail order, actual snail mail order writing class from Writer's Digest with Michael Garrett, who some of you may remember the name. He used to be the editor of a series called Hot Blooded, which was kind of horror / porn. I don't know how to describe.
I think you've done it.
Yeah. But he was my writing instructor. I still have some of the old hand typed pages, the original pages from Haven from back then. But I would write it in fits and starts. I would write for a little while, and then life gets in the way. I was raising my kids at the time, and I finally finished it in 2012. So I kind of say that's when I started really writing. But Haven took me about 15 years to write.
If I could just share something, I remember, Tom, when we met back in 2017, when I put out my first books, I remember I became aware of you, and I, cyber stalked you, really to an really unhealthy level. But I found, a really sweet post that your daughter had written, and she was so very proud of you. And I've just never forgotten the gist of it, which was just basically that my dad spent 15 years writing this book, and she was so proud of you, and it came out, and you won a Stoker, and I was like, oh man, this is like the best thing I've ever read.
My two daughters were my biggest, and my wife were my biggest supporters, and I tell my daughters, like, that's Haven is the third sibling, because I was raising them at the same time I was trying to get that written. And funny you say that, Steve, because when we were at the year I won, the Stokers were at the Queen Mary in Long Beach, and I flew my daughters out because I was on the ballot. And when they ever announced my name, my older daughter just like latched on with this never-ending hug, and they're up there waiting for me, like, is Tom here? And she wouldn't let go. Oh, it was great. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That was nice.
Steve, you'll get a fan one day.
That too.
Larry was at my table. Larry is like the Stoker whisperer. If you want to win a Stoker, have him sit at your table.
He was sitting at Chris.
Is that true?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, he was at
always
the table with
always a bridesmaid, never a bride. Is that the deal?
Pretty much, but if you let me sit at your table, and you will win if you are nominated. I won't win, but you might win.
We will all win because we're hanging out with you, Larry.
Oh, that's so sweet and weird.
I know.
It's like weird. It's okay to be cheesy. It's fine. Like, people should just be cheesy more. I don't know why they're not. Like, it's just weird.
I feel like we've just gotten to know each other so much better through this rack. Like, Tom and I, this is like our fourth little shindig together in the last couple of weeks. And I'm like,
yeah,
you're my best friend now. You don't know this, but
you've been my best friend since you won the Stoker and inspired.
There we go, right?
Hey, I have a copy of Tales of Circadia that is made out to me. Steve Van Samson, my favorite person in the entire world, loved Tom Deady. That's my prized possession. You think I'm lying, but it's in the other room, so I can't get it conveniently, but I have it. And Tom remembers.
Tear it up.
I didn't have my other arm twisted behind my back when I was writing that.
No.
Tom doesn't remember it because he doesn't sign his own books. That's how big.
And for all of you who want a copy of any of Tom Deady's books made out to his favorite person in the world, all you got to do is just ask him. He'll just do it. They're all filthy lies, but it doesn't matter. You can show all your friends and you'll be like, see, look, I told you. And they're like, oh my God, wow. I guess you are his favorite person. Wow, that's amazing.
Wait, we didn't get Philip's answer on that question. I don't want to leave him out while we have our little
Love
party
fest.
here.
Love fest.
It's a charcuterie.
How long have I been writing horror? Right.
Yeah.
Well, I've been writing. My whole life. I had written a few novels, and then around 2010, I started writing screenplays, and I wrote a Lifetime movie, and I wrote for a few movies for Disney, and I was trying to option a story from Laird Barron to adapt into a screenplay, and this is around I want to say around 2012 maybe, and it didn't work out, but I was writing. The weird thing was I was writing horror screenplays, but I was writing non-genre fiction.
Mm-hmm.
I try not to say literary because it sounds snooty. But because I'd befriended Laird and because I've become such a big fan of Laird's work, I was like, well, maybe I should, instead of writing horror screenplays, maybe I should try writing a horror story. So I wrote a story called Mother, and I showed it to Laird, and he was like, yeah, dude, this is really good. You need to keep going. And he gave me a lot of great feedback. And then I wrote a story called Surfer Girl, and then I wrote a story called Alter, which has got made into a movie by A24. And this was all around 20, like I said, right around 20, call it 2013, 2014. So I really only started writing horror right around 2015. So about 10 years. I think Mother was published in 2015 and Alter was published in 2016. So yeah, not very long.
We need to know more about this Lifetime movie now that you brought that up.
Was it a horror Lifetime movie?
It's horror, yeah. It's called Girl Missing. And it was originally called I can't remember what it was originally called, but it was so long ago. But Lifetime changed the title to Girl Missing. And yeah, it's like a ghost story thriller. Starring Francesca Eastwood. So I wrote that, and I still write screenplays. I kind of dabble in both sides, but so far horror fiction's been really good to me. Boys in the Valley was my first Big 5 release, and now I've got I think 3 novels coming out in the next year and a half. So things are good. Although I am writing my next novel. My next novel is actually science fiction.
Okay.
Which is a first for me. So yeah, we'll see how that goes with Orbit, called The Third Rule of Time Travel.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
I'm assuming there's time travel in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
March it comes out.
How did you get that?
Spoiler.
just lucky guess.
Well, that's funny, because it was originally the book was called Observe, and when I sold it to Orbit, it's coming out next March, Orbit US and Orbit UK, and they were very enthusiastic, but then the editor was like, I think we're gonna want to change the title, because they really want to work time travel into the title of the book, because they want people to know it's a time travel book. And Observe was a little too obtuse. So what was funny about it was I was at a con in the UK last year, and my UK editor was there, and I kind of cornered her and I said, hey, what's the deal with this new title? Do you guys do you guys have any ideas yet? I'm anxious to hear it because I'm nervous, because I think Observe that's the only title this book can have. I really don't think anything else would work. And then she said, well, we're thinking The Third Rule of Time Travel. And I said, oh, that's really good. I like it. So that's much better than my title. So anyway, I'm excited about getting a science fiction book out there, and we'll see how it does.
Amy's got another question, and I guess it'll depend on the type of story it looks like. But when you're writing a short story, what comes first to you? The characters, the plot, setting, or horror elements? Or like I said, does it just depend on what the story is? Mercedes, we'll start with you. Put you under the...
Yeah, I love it. I thrive under this. For me, it's character 100%. My stories are all very character driven. So I will have a character, and I'm also a pantser. I don't plot. So I don't know what the horror element is going to be, or I don't know, anything about it, I'll just sit down with the character and just go. Usually I need to find their name. If I do a placeholder name, it doesn't work until I figure out what their name is, and that helps me to find the character. But like, I have a book that came out, Darling, which is a Southern Gothic novel. And I was listening to a song, Follow the Cops Back Home by Placebo, if you guys know Placebo. And I just had this like vision in my head of like these two really worn out characters walking down like this country lane road, and they were just so weary and so tired and such despair. And that was like the seed for that novel. I didn't know anything about it, but I just knew these two characters, and they had just been like beaten to the ground by life. So for me, character, and then I figure out what they're doing and how they would react to things. So yeah, I can't like, I'm going to make this story about this. I never know. I just write it, and then I'm like, oh, is that what happens? Whoa, you know? So that's how it starts always for me. No doubt.
So did you pants the story for this anthology too? Because I feel like that one, really?
Yeah.
I feel like you'd have to know where that one was going, the way, the way it ends up.
I never know. I never know where I'm going, my loves. Like, no, never. This was a pants, and then I went through it and corrected a few things, and that was it. So
you allowed a character to write it for you.
Yeah, they do. If you know your character well enough, you know like what they will do and what they won't do. Like, you know what is true to their character and what's not, and you can tell when people are trying to like the plot says the character has to do this, and it doesn't seem true to that character. You can feel that, right? So if you know your character well enough, they will write their own story, because if you try to put them to do something that they wouldn't do, like, they're not going to do it. You're like, all this time you've been like a super feminist, but suddenly you're going to like go and like hate women, and you're like, that doesn't feel right, but the plot says to do that. They won't do it. It feels very fake. It feels very amateur. So yeah, the characters write their own story. I just let them.
Larry, what about you?
It just depends. Sometimes it's a character that pops in my head. Sometimes it's a story idea. There's one story like in my collection called "Can You Dig It?" that I was taking Fright Club, this class that used to be taught through the HWA, and the assignment that week was for a haunted object, and the instructor put me on the spot in class and said, what is your story going to be? And I just a haunted shovel. It just is what poured it out of my mouth, and that's what I wrote the story. So the story is about a haunted shovel, and it turned out to be a really cool story. But I never would have come up with that on my own. I mean, I ride my bike a lot. A lot of times ideas just pop in my head as you're writing. Like my novella I've got that I just finished is coming out in the spring. I was writing, and just this one trail I'd never seen before, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I wonder what. And then it just kind of morphed into a story that's in my collection, and it kept getting bigger and bigger, and now it's a novella, and it's I never would have come up with that if it weren't for riding my bike and seeing this little off trail on the side of it. And it also happened to be at the time I was processing the death of one of my dogs, and so my doggy's in the story with me because it's semi autobiographical. But so yeah, it just depends. Sometimes it's a character, sometimes it's the setting. I've written stories where just the last line will pop in my head, and I think, ooh, how do I get to that line? Because I write a lot of horror comedy too, so a lot of times a lot of my stories are punchlines. So,
okay,
yeah.
Philip, what about you?
I think, like Larry, I think it's an idea for short stories specifically. I think it's like I have an idea, kind of an off the wall idea, and then I kind of build around the idea. I just, a lot of it's, comes from what ifing, things that you see and do every day. Alter was the result of me being at a pool and saying, what if a sinkhole opened underneath this pool, and what if this pool is full of children? And and you just kind of the usual stuff that you think about.
Yeah, of course.
At the dinner table with the family. Yeah.
And it's weird, like it's little things trigger you. My wife stealing the blankets one night led to me writing an 11,000 word story about marriage called Mother. That's supernatural and about witches and stuff. It's like little things. Just it's almost like they're triggers for things that you already have locked up inside your head, and they sort of get released when you see something or when something happens to you, and the story is just kind of there for me. And it's not really much more than that. Novels, it's a bit different. I think you have an idea, and then the way it works for me is if I have an idea that I kind of like, I sort of think about it for a while, and kind of to Mercedes' point a little bit, if characters begin to come to life around that idea, and then the characters begin to interact around that idea, and it kind of gets stretched out, then that could be maybe something I turn into a novel or a longer story. But with both short stories, I can kind of build around an idea. I always know where my stories. I always have at least the ending before I start writing, because I don't want to get stuck halfway through and not know where to go. So, but I know a lot of people that do it, like Mercedes, that are pantsers. With novels, I'm a very hardcore outliner. I want to know exactly what's going to happen before I start writing. That said, sometimes it'll change. I'll be halfway through the book and a character will do something that I didn't expect them to do, or I didn't plan on them doing, and I'll have to redo the outline because they've changed the course of the story. So, but I always start with the structure in place. The only time I haven't done that is with the book I wrote that's coming out next September from Nightfire, and for whatever reason I couldn't see an outline. I couldn't see the ending. It just never came to me the way they normally do. And so but I was on a deadline, so I just started writing, and it turned out pretty good. It was an interesting process. I've never done that before, and it was interesting to sort of play it by ear. And I didn't love it because I had to keep going back and fixing stuff to make what I was writing tomorrow make sense. What I wrote 3 days ago, I had to make sense for what I was writing tomorrow, kind of thing. But it was interesting and it was inspiring. I wouldn't want to do it a lot, but I did enjoy doing it the one time. It was kind of fun. So I could see doing it again at some point.
Is that looming deadline? Is that nerve-wracking?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's incredibly nerve-wracking. Yeah, like I'm doing edits on that book right now, and I have 2 more weeks before I turn them in. It's a hard deadline because the book's already got a release date. So yeah, it's stressful. It's stressful. Yeah, you can't mess around. It's a novel, it's 500 pages or whatever. So I gotta get it done. And you have a lot of notes from. See, now I'm being stressed out thinking about it. You have a lot of notes from the editor.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said anything. I'm
no,
sorry.
It's okay. Saying
breathe.
What if we did this, or what if and it's sometimes the notes are a little vague. I don't mean that in a negative way, but they're just because they don't really know how. They're not telling you how to fix it. You just have to fix it. So so deadlines are stressful, but they're also I'm not complaining because I feel very fortunate that I have deadlines and that I have books that are being published. So it's just part of the gig, but so it's okay.
See, in the back of your head, you're just thinking, why am I wasting my time on this podcast no one's ever heard of? I could be editing my book.
No, it's necessary to get your head out of it a little bit. So it's okay. I'm at my desk like 10 hours a day. So just focused on stuff like that. So it's good for me to kind of to do something else and you kind of go back a little fresher.
Well, and we're cheering you on. So you have that extra oomph now.
Thank you.
Steve, what about you? Do you remember the question? It's been a while.
Yeah.
What comes first for you?
So honestly, kind of the opposite of what Mercedes said. I characters I fill in like last. I'm also a pantser, but for me, everything's a Twilight Zone. Every single thing I've ever written, I think is just a Twilight Zone. So I figure out like what the setup is. And usually sometimes that comes from just like Philip said, you're like, oh, there's a pool. And what if there's a sinkhole under, like that kind of a thing. You're just like, you see something and something sparks and you're like, what if there was one detail that messed this all up? And, that becomes interesting and you kind of just develop that. But that's the sort of, setup for the Twilight Zone. And then there's usually a twist. And, so for me, I'm like, well, I try to get to the end of the idea before I stop thinking about the idea. Even if I'm not going to write it right then, I'll write like, a 1,000 words or 1,500 word treatment just for myself. So I just get everything out. And then I start thinking about characters as like sort of the third step. So I have my beginning, I have an idea of the ending, and then I start developing the characters. And then what they do is throw the ending out the window every single time. every single time. Like, I feel like I need to figure out the ending point, but it always changes. And the reason it changes is exactly what Mercedes said. And Philip to a point too. The idea that, your characters, let's be real. Like, if they're well written, then they start to drive the car, and it sounds ridiculous, but all writers say it because it happens. Like, and if it's not happening, then you might be doing the other thing Mercedes said can happen, and this is why I clapped when you said it. Like, if you are forcing something to happen because you needed it to happen, and you've committed to that like plot point, but you're there now and it just does not make any sense, and the characters would never, it's like the everything that the first Scream makes fun of, like, why are they going upstairs? Just run out the front door kind of thing. It's like, well, because the movie needed them to run upstairs so they could be in more dire peril. Like, but that's stupid. Nobody would do that, but that's what they wanted it to be. So right. And if you paint yourself into these corners, I think a lot of times, movies that we think are bad or books we think are bad or just whatever, it's a lot of times because of that kind of stuff, where it's like, okay, but these decisions don't make any sense, so nothing works. Nothing holds water. You don't really believe in the characters. You don't really care about the characters because they just feel fake and stuff. So I would say that the characters are the most important part, absolutely, but I generally fill them in sort of at a midpoint, at best. Very rarely do I have a fully formed, like, I'm gonna write a story with Snake Plissken. He's this dude. And he wears Arctic camo pants for no reason, and he's got a cool eye patch and some hair and some stubble, and he's really badass. Now, what can I do with Snake Plissken? It's like that just doesn't happen at all for me. So.
Wait, how do you spell that last name?
Oh, that's with like 14 S's.
Okay, I was just writing it down for the
future. Yeah.
Tom, what about you?
I'm also a pantser, so I generally never know where my stories are going. But like Mercedes said, most of my stories are very character driven. I tend to write a lot of like Haven coming of age, small town kids type stuff. And I always start with a character and kind of like Philip said, come up with well, what if this character, goes fishing in the lake and pulls out a sea monster or a lake monster, or so it's kind of a combination of what Mercedes and others have said. That, but to be honest, you guys, you don't want to listen to my writing advice. My writing is all like, I will actually come up with, like, when I was writing Haven, I'll just think of a scene and I have no idea when it's going to happen in the book, but it's like I know it's going to happen and it's a really cool scene, so I'll write that scene and then figure out later. So when I wrote Haven, I ended up with like 100 index cards with all these scenes, and I was like, wait, this has to happen here, and
like a puzzle.
So yeah, my writing process isn't for everyone. Let's put it that way.
One thing I do that a lot of people think is kind of weird, and I think it's just because writing TV spots and radio spots for a living, is I write a lot of my dialogue first, and I will just have the characters just talking, and as I'm rewriting, a lot of what they're saying in the initial dialogue then becomes, it isn't dialogue anymore, it's part of the story. Right. But I think that's how I get to know my characters, is just have them start talking to each other, and I have no idea what's going to happen until they just start talking, and then one of them will say something weird and say, oh, that's kind of cool, let's see what happens with that. But
I think that's interesting because I feel like a lot of writers don't like writing dialogue, and that's what you start with.
I love writing dialogue.
I love writing dialogue too.
Right.
Love it.
I love it too.
I feel like
a lot of writers can't write dialogue.
I feel like that's a hard thing because as a reader, you can tell if like no one would ever talk like this, or if it feels really authentic.
Right. Well, I think a lot of writers don't listen like I think we should be listening. Writers have something that we want to say, so we're really good at saying, and I don't think we hear how people speak really sometimes. It's hard to sit and listen because we want that output. But I think you can tell like a writer that just listens to people talk enough. And dialogue moves the story along so well. Like it just, if you're reading something, you kind of get bogged down, you put dialogue, and suddenly you're just reading more smoothly. Oh, I love it. I love it so much. I have a crush on dialogue.
What kills me is when they write
why don't
kids.
you marry
and
it?
then,
I will marry dialogue.
Okay.
what kills me is kids that talk like 40-year-olds. Like that just like totally takes me out of stories when they don't write kids dialogue the right way. Like that would never happen. You could tell that they're not parents, they don't have kids, or they would know that kids don't act like that or
it's
say
like
that
really
thing.
robotic.
I feel like
you're
really attacking Charles Schultz here. I don't know what you're.
It's horrible. My kids call me like mother and father. They're 13 and 16, and they're like mother, but it's very tongue in cheek. But it's like mother, come forth with
Mother murder.
But they are writers' kids, so
yeah. They say it ironically, like one would say
kids
until
don't
the
talk
cows
like that.
come home.
Yeah, right.
There's a few questions left in the chat. I just will make sure everyone's still good on time. No one has to rush off or anything. Okay, cool.
I don't even remember what wearing a watch feels like.
It's Friday night, and you are my friends. Let's do this. Let's do this.
I didn't know if anyone want to go watch Salem's Lot or trash it or whatever.
No.
They already did.
Philip's going to take a bunch of cold medicine here and pass out, but that's it. Right?
Yeah.
Vincent's got a question. When you're writing stories, do you know it's going to be a short story immediately, or can the ideas develop right out from under your preconceptions? So they go longer than the normal, you think? We'll start with you, Tom.
Yeah, so I a few years ago, I started writing novellas, and I became became my thing for a little while. I was writing all these novellas. I put out a bunch of them in a row. People were like, why'd you pick the novella length? Because it's such a weird length. Like it wasn't very popular. And I said, well, they kind of started out as short stories. So I was never really a great short story writer because I love character development and backstories and subplots. And so, writing a succinct short story was never really my thing, and they would always evolve into novellas. So, brevity is not my friend when it comes to writing.
I remember reading that. I think it's Coleridge. You had a novella called Coleridge. I remember reading that one a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Yep.
I've always looked at novellas as like a 90-minute movie in and out.
Oh yeah.
Good horror length is a 90-minute movie. So
yep.
Mm-hmm. Steve, what about you? Do they start out as short stories, or they evolve into novels?
It's never happened that anything evolved into anything else. It's weird for me. I know immediately what it is.
Okay.
Like I said, it's a lot of it's short. A lot of it's like Twilight Zone. So I'm like, okay, is this season like 1, 2, 3, and what's the one? Season 5, I think, has the hour-long episodes. So is a season 5 episode or not? Like, I don't know. But there's
like the
usually
30-page short story, or no? Just
right. Well, honestly, this one lips like a scythe. This one did end up, being longer than I intended. So that was it's still a short story though, but it was longer than I intended. But it's actually harder for me to write to a really short, like an open call or something. If I see something that's like 2,000 words, that is so hard for me to do, and I'm always like dying for more word count, and usually I just write the thing and then I cut it back down, and there have been times where I've written to that 2,000 and then it got rejected, so I was like, yes, and I go back and I double it, I did 2.5 it or something, and I'm like, okay, this is what it's supposed to be. Whoever wants it can have it. But like, usually I know right away if it's a novel or a short story, just based on the concept of it. Cause you can tell if there's enough meat on that bone. Like, you're like, is this like what, I don't know. You get a sense for it.
I feel like writing those really short, the 2,000 words of horror stories, I feel like that's going to be harder than writing a novel or whatever. Cause you have to squeeze so much in. You're so constricted.
Yeah. I think it is harder. I think writing at 2,000, like an amazing.
Like, nope.
I can tell you with much certainty that it's much harder to write a novel.
Okay.
I understand the point you're making. Yeah. One takes me a day, one takes me 3 months. But I appreciate the idea of what you're saying, that the story is a little more constricted. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mercedes, what about you? Do you always know it's going to be a short story?
Yeah, and 2000 is my sweet spot. I like to write lean. I like to write short. I feel like a lot of things I read are super padded and drawn out, and I don't like that myself. So I'll know. I'll be like, this is a short story, and mostly I write for calls. Like people will ask me to write short stories for a certain length, and it usually tends to be short because there's we're doing this anthology and we have this many pages and we need something small because everyone's going really long. And I'm like, yes, I can do that. Woo! So yeah, I know, just like Steve, I know by the concept and how long I think it's going to be and kind of where my interest is. And I like shorts too, because they're so gratifying. You're just like, I just wrote a story complete, middle, beginning, middle, end, and I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm done. And that it's like, I like that instant gratification. And I like novels too, but you're just so much longer, so much more of your life, and I have 3 kids. So it's like really hard to, hey kids, mom's going to ignore you for a couple of hours. It's hard to do that. So yeah, I like the shorts. I know what they are.
That like instant gratification makes me feel like reading a novel, but short chapters. Like, yes, I got it done. And it's like, let's succeed.
My chapters in novels tend to be about 1,000 words. Like that kind of seems to be my, okay, we're done. Too much talking, done,
I love short chapters in novels. Actually, I think Boys in the Valley is a really great example of that. I think the chapters in Boys in the Valley are perfect. They're nice and nice and tight. Like Game of Thrones has these, 2,000 word chapters. I don't know.
Like you flounder after so
long. Maybe 5,000 word. Maybe I don't even know.
There needs to be a point where the story breaks enough that you can put in your bookmark and go do something else.
Right.
Like a 60-page chapter is like, oh my gosh. Like it can be great too, but it's like it takes me forever to read it as opposed to 6-10-page chapters.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have that like thought, like you can't leave in the middle of a chapter usually. You can't leave in the middle of a thought. And it's like I'm held captive by this 60-page chapter now.
Right.
And I'm not enjoying it as much,
Yeah.
Ugh.
Larry, what about you? Do you always know it's going to be a short story?
I'm so glad you asked the question again, because I was about I'm surprised I haven't asked yet. What was that question again? Yes, I have always known it's going to be a short story, because up until this recent novella I have only written short stories. I had never written anything longer than 5,700 words. And there were actually there were characters from 3 stories in my collection and a setting from a 4th story. Couldn't get out of my head, and I ended up combining them all into a 37,000 word novella. And now I'm like, shit, am I ever going to write short again? Because it was a lot of fun writing this thing, and I'd never done something like that before. And I got about a third of the way through it, because I'm a total pantser, and I was like, fuck, I'm going to actually have to write an outline for this thing. So I wrote the outline, and then I get about like 2/3 of the way through it and realize, oh, this outline isn't working anymore. So I'm rewriting the outline as I'm going. But up until then, yes, everything had always been a short story, because that's all I knew how to write. And I think a lot of that comes from just, again, being in advertising. When you're writing a 60-second radio spot, you've got more or less 160 words. And that's all you have. You have to tell your entire story in that set amount of words. So that's just, I'm just used to writing short. And Tom and Krista Carmen, who's also in my writing group, and Valerie Williams and some other people were just constantly on me. It's like, you need to write something longer. And I just kept resisting and resisting. And I finally did. And it was really cool. It was fun writing something longer than 5,000 words for a change. So cool. We'll see what happens the next time. I mean, I have an idea for the next one, and I can't decide if it's going to be a short story or another novella. I don't know yet. I guess I actually have to start writing it, and we'll see.
That's the exciting part, the discovery of it.
Yeah.
Philip, what about you? Do you always know it's going to be a short story?
Yes. Yes, I'm rarely surprised. I pretty much have a pretty good idea of story length before I start something. It also dictates the pacing of what I'm writing. If I know it's going to be 3,000 words, like The Visitor in this book, I write it a different style. The prose moves a little cleaner, a little quicker. If I know it's going to be a 10,000 word story, I might take my time a little bit more. So yeah, I pretty much know. The only time I think I've ever been caught off guard was I wrote a novella that was supposed to be in my second story collection, and I sent the collection to my agent, and she read the novella and she said, "I think this should be a novel." And it was already long. It was even for a novella, it was long. It was like 44,000 words. So it was, so I turned it into a novel called Gothic, but which Cemetery Dance put out a couple years ago. So other than that, that's yeah, I pretty much know going in. Sometimes I'll be surprised at novel lengths. You know, I wrote Child of a Stranger is 170,000 words. Whereas like Boys in the Valley is, I think, 90,000 words. So sometimes I go long, but you know, for the most part, I pretty much know. Yeah, before I start, I definitely know whether it's a story, or a novella, or a novel, or whatever screenplay, whatever the idea is. I know what the right fit is for it. Yeah, the only other thing I would say is sometimes I'll have an idea that I think would be a great novella. And I'll pitch that to like an editor at like a publishing house, and they'll ask me if I could stretch it into a novel without, sacrificing obviously story or pacing or anything. So, and that's happened to me recently a couple times. So I'll have to go back and sort of rethink the story and other things I could bring into the story to expand it without just like talking about, like in Cujo, where Stephen King talks about cereal for like 24 pages. It's like sometimes you just want to keep things moving. So anyway, yeah, but for the most part, I always know.
So Bob Pastorella from the world famous This Is Horror podcast has a question. Do you all have to get into a different headspace writing stories steeped in nostalgia, digging into time-worn tropes, or was it like any other writing session at the keyboard? Philip, we'll start with you again.
Well, I've written some historical fiction. I have a novel coming out this month from Earthling Publications called Serafina, which takes place during the Civil War. So very different vibe. And then this is my science fiction novel, Third Rule of Time Travel, that's coming out in March. So to go from Civil War to hard sci-fi, you would think would be very jarring, but I think ultimately it's not for me. It all feels the same when I'm writing. Both take different kinds of research. Both take time. But no, I don't, if I'm understanding the question correctly, my headspace is pretty consistent. No matter what I'm writing, I kind of just go into the zone of what I'm doing. What I will say that, may or may not be interesting to that point is sometimes I will say when I do write, as long as I'm able, I only write one project at a time because I'm doing a lot of writing when I'm not actually physically at the keyboard writing. I'm always thinking about the story. I'm always thinking about the next scene. I'm always thinking about the characters. I'm always thinking about different things I could do. So I don't like to have multiple projects going at the same time. I like to be in one world the whole time I'm in that world, and then I go to a different world. But that's maybe the only thing about headspace is, and sometimes I don't have that option. Sometimes I have multiple. I got a story due, and I got a novel thing I'm writing. So sometimes that's not an option, but most of the time that's definitely the way I like to do things, because I like to write and be thinking about that story 24/7 and not have to think about multiple stories.
Larry, what about you?
I depend on music a lot to change my headspace. If I'm writing something, something like really brutal, I'll listen to a lot of death metal or something. And if I'm writing something, I'm listening. I'm like the story I want to write now. I want to write a folk horror story. So I've been listening to more pastoral sort of things, trying to find soundtracks like old things like The Wicker Man and stuff like that. Yeah. And that is how I get into a better headspace. It also helps if whatever I'm going to write, I will also like try to watch movies or read books in that same sort of genre to get my mind thinking that way. Uh-huh. And that's usually what I do. But yeah, I always have not a playlist, but I'll sit down. It's like, wait, this story I'm listening, just like this is all Black Sabbath, this one, and that's all I'll listen to for that particular story or something. And that helps a lot. Yeah. I'm one of the few, a lot of writers I know can't listen to lyrics when they're writing, but lyrics, they don't bother me at all. It's just the feeling I'm getting from the music. A lot of doom minor chords and stuff really, really help.
Mm-hmm. Mercedes, what about you?
My writing is all kind of in the same headspace. Like I am so anxious and scattered and crazy and thinking about like 20,000 things all the time. So when I sit down to write, I have to completely remove myself from all of this or I can't write. So I listen to like the binaural beats, because I can't do lyrics. I can't do lyrics because I'm like, oh yeah, and
or singing along and typing those words.
Yes, I do that. And it's so frustrating. I'm like, my character wouldn't say that, the Who said that or whatever. So So for me, it's the same headspace, but I have to completely detach myself from the here and now because I can't write with all this on my brain. So yeah, I put on my headphones. I have to hide and make sure I have enough time to get into it. And when you come out of it, it's like being drunk. Like it's like a hangover. If you're like in that really good writing space and get yanked out of it, you're just kind of staggering around and can't function properly. So I try to I don't get a lot of time in one block. So I try to get like at least a half an hour that I can write in one block, but it's really hard. Like my oldest kid has special needs and doesn't understand, like, mom's working mom's working, but come look at my keyboard, or I looked this up on YouTube and so it's just hard to kind of get into that space, but it's the same. It's consistently the same space, no matter what I'm working on.
Steve, what about you?
Well, because this happened to be a nostalgia book, and that is the question technically, my life is nostalgia. I also co-host a podcast called Retro Redoctopus, where we talk about all sorts of goofy nostalgia stuff, and we also do interviews as well. But we so it's literally my life. So it is always like simmering just there beneath the surface. And so for me, like doing an homage to my favorite shit basically was pretty easy. Now, if you told me to write something that was like, if you like, can you want to write the new Garth Brooks biography? I'd be like, oh, what? Like, but this particular job was like, I'm there. This is tailor made for me. Mm-hmm. Which Tom knew because Tom knew that because I'm his favorite person. He wrote it down.
Of course.
So, yeah.
I think Tom just peeks in your windows. He knows what's going on.
Yeah, I'm just so bitter about this. I thought Tom and I were total besties. I'm glad he doesn't peek in my windows. So,
that's always a bonus.
I mean, we could start some trouble and find out who he was going to ask first to be in this.
I think I was last, so I don't feel because he saved the best for last. I think
I'll be right back.
When he read that story of mine, he's like, this could work for like an anthology of stories like this one, Larry. Maybe we should call it like The Rack or something.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's
we have Larry to thank for this one. It's all from his story.
It is all me.
Larry is definitely the hero of his own story.
Steve's getting his book to show me.
I figured that's what he was doing.
He is.
And I'm just gonna weep and weep.
Yeah.
So
How many words was Haven, Tom?
What's that?
How many words was Haven?
144,000.
Wow.
All right, Steve, hold on. Let me zoom in on you, Steve.
Here we go.
There we go.
That's some Glenn Chadbourne artwork right there.
I know you all think I'm full of shit.
To my
favorite
person
in the world. Now, Tom, can you
Boom.
authenticate? Is that your actual signature, Tom, or did he write that himself?
No, that's all me. Steve handed me the book, and that's just what came out of my hand when I wrote it.
So when you were editing this, Tom, were you in that full like nostalgia 80s mode the whole time?
Well, I'm like Steve. My whole life is 80s movies and 80s song lyrics, and so I'm pretty much always in that headspace. So it was really easy for me. It's harder for me to like get into a headspace of how do I write something happening in current times, because I feel like it's much easier to write timepieces like that because there's no technology. So you try to write today, nobody can get lost because everybody has GPS. It's never dark because everyone has a flashlight app. There's always a phone, there's always signal. It's like, so it's hard for me to write around technology. So I'm always in that headspace of when I was a kid growing up, and it's the right what thing.
And I want to add, it's my least favorite thing. It's a pet peeve of mine whenever I watch a horror movie, and I'm just waiting for I have no cell reception line.
Right. Or my battery's dead. Yep.
Or
the car won't start.
So
awful.
lazy.
Yeah.
So lazy.
I don't know. I grew up in a place where like cell reception is really spotty, like you're at the cabin and you're out, man.
I know it happens, but it just happens in every horror movie.
Conveniently.
They conveniently lose reception.
Convenient. Yeah.
Yep.
The fact that people say that they grew up in a space with cell reception. I didn't grow up with cell phones.
No.
Oh no.
Jake had the old rotary phone. You had to crank it and
yeah.
No, I'm talking about the old ones before that, Jay.
Oh yeah.
The one
Mercedes is only like 23. You guys.
Oh, I appreciate that a lot.
I have T-Mobile, and it's like I don't have cell reception.
Same.
God, they're with our T-Mobile sponsor, man.
Our sponsor.
What Tom was saying too about that nostalgia, and when we didn't have these things as kids, right? When we were kids, everything was scary. Everything was frightening, right? You didn't have flashlights, you didn't have these things. You'd be out doing all this stuff. And I was trying to explain to my kids, like you would make plans with a person and be like, "I will meet you there at 5." And if they're not there at 5, you maybe wait till 5:30 and then you go on your own. And just, there was no checking in. There was, and that was a kind of a frightening time, because you just didn't have this assurance that things would work out like you hoped that they would, and it was just kind of a different environment with like a lot of different fears than I think our kids have now. My kids' fears are very different than mine. My kids' fears are very, very different than what mine were.
Right.
But we grew up in kind of a sinister time.
I like what Bob says. You have to create new obstacles to hinder characters in contemporary stories nowadays. Everything's so connected. Zero isolation for the most part.
Yeah, the isolation piece is huge in horror, and it's hard to get there.
Yeah, when you're all connected, you just call whoever.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the opposite is more terrifying. The idea of people like being on your phones there was this, I think Korean movie called Unlocked, where this guy like finds this woman's phone and just can be everywhere by being on her phone and getting into all her info. I think that's like the new horror, it's a total trope flip, but I think it's so terrifying. I would love to be alone now. Isolate me.
Please leave me alone.
Send me to my room. Yeah. Kidnap me and put me in the basement. Right. That's silence. I am so for that.
So since the anthology, it's all inspired by vintage horror paperbacks. I wanted to ask each of you all when we're wrapping up here, Do you all have a favorite old school horror paperback that you just really love? Tom, we'll start with you since you're the editor here.
Yeah, my favorite is still the one I started with, Salem's Lot, but a close second would be King's first collection, Night Shift, which had the
Night Shift's great.
The hand with
the hand on there, yeah.
on, another fantastic cover. Yeah.
Nice.
Larry, what about you?
Night Shift, I think, is the single greatest collection ever written. And my other two are the Books of the Dead 1 and 2 by Skip Inspector. The kind of just revitalized zombies for a while. And I remember getting those and just devouring, just sitting and reading the entire book cover to cover in one sitting. And
Nice.
those two are two of my favorite writers. When I was younger, like The Scream and The Bridge and all the stuff. The light at the end, they were so good.
Mercedes, what about you?
My favorite's probably the F. Paul Wilson, The Keep, which is kind of the one that started me on that path. But then also that's where I found like Stephen King's It, which I read when I was 8 and has really deeply affected me. Well, we lived right by a storm drain, so I'd have to walk past it on the way home. And I would worry, man.
Steve, what about you?
So this is kind of where I can't hang. We never really had horror in the house, really, movie or book wise. My mom was like a voracious reader and stuff, but so I started to really just enter in with the kid stuff. So my favorite of all time is this series that's called Tales for the Midnight Hour. The first one was 1977. I actually came in. The second one was 1987. They're all written by Judith Bauer Stamper under J.B. Stamper, and they're just micro short stories. And I mean, I had 3 or 4 of these books. I read them cover to cover like a billion times, and that was all the horror I could get my hands on. So, like, yeah, sure, later in life, I read stuff, plenty of things over the years, sure. But like, as far as like my nostalgia bit, it's more like the kid stuff. Also, Bunnicula was a real good one. Loved Bunnicula. And there's just various like kid books that I would like, get to see at the school library kind of thing.
Yeah. Were you a Goosebumps guy? Were you a Goosebumps kid?
I was never a Goosebumps kid.
Oh.
I feel like I didn't know what Goosebumps were when there was a TV show in the 90s, and I feel like that was my entrance to Goosebumps. We just didn't have them in the school libraries for some reason. But I really like the short story collections though. Like, and I think that's what I like now. So yeah, I don't know, kind of a lame answer, but yet
no,
it's
not a lame answer.
Truth.
Philip, what about you?
Man. For me, it's pretty easy. It was The Shining, and I had a copy that had, you guys will probably know it. I actually have it in the other room, but it's the silver cover with the kind of the boy's head in the middle.
Right.
That kind of iconic silver cover of The Shining was that was my kind of, that was the one I read cover to cover multiple times when I was a kid. So that would be my rack introduction, my rack book, I guess, if I had one.
Nice.
That's still my favorite King, is the Shining novel.
For me, it's Salem's Lot for me. That was my first King. It's still my favorite one.
Yeah, I actually lost that book, over the years, and a fan of my work, I think I mentioned it somewhere in a podcast or something like this, and they reached out to me and they had one and they sent it to me as a gift. So I have the one that they sent me, which was very sweet.
Very cool.
That's cool.
Yeah. Tom,
is the Salem's Lot you held up, is that your original one you had from when you're younger?
Yeah, unfortunately, it is not. I wish I still had that. I do have my original 1986 hardcover of It that is completely falling apart. The binding broke and the pages are falling out, because that Salem's Lot was my first, but it is my favorite, and I've read that over and over. I've got where's my tattoo? My Pennywise tattoo there. But yeah, I wish I had my original Salem's Lot. I got rid of all my paperbacks from hell during one of my moves
man.
at some point, and I regret it so much.
I love Salem's Lot too, though. That's Salem's Lot is the only book I've ever read twice in a row. Like I
Really?
finished it and I just read it again.
Started right back.
Yep.
Yeah. That one's for me. It still hasn't been top. That one's still my favorite one.
It's definitely
just the
top
town.
5 for me.
The town
I love it.
itself. The town itself, just the way he brings these side characters to life, is great.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, my favorite. Well, I mean, Night Shift is my favorite of his collections, but The Stand is my favorite book of his.
Nice.
I'm reading The Stand, rereading The Stand right now.
Yeah, so am I. It's just you have to read it every year.
It's awesome. Yeah, it's such a great book.
So
I think
good.
it is probably my favorite Stephen King book, but I'm really enjoying The Stand reread.
Yes. Duma
I need to read The Stand. I need to read The Stand for the new anthology that's coming out. That's like 800 pages that everybody's in. I need to read that too.
Yeah.
Brian J. Lewis, Duma Key.
is great too. Yeah,
Duma Key's
Duma
great.
Key is a very underrated King book. It's
wildly underrated.
Probably top 5 for me.
Yeah, I love it, and I love the villain. The monster is just so
great.
cool.
I love the cover of Duma Key, but I think the cover maybe messed up.
I think so too.
The perception of the book, because it's like a very colorful. It's got like a beach on it, and I think it's not the classic black cover Stephen King book. So I think that I also never really loved the white. I think it was Scribner did those series of white Stephen King covers. I didn't really get.
Oh yeah.
Why they did that. I wasn't a big fan.
I think
I don't think I need every cover to be black, but I don't know. Just
there's a few in a row. Like Dreamcatcher's really white, and was it Bag of Bones or something's really white on
Bag
the
of
cover.
Bones,
There's like 3 in a
Everything
row.
Eventual. Yeah, they were all that series.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
From a Buick, it's kind of mostly white. It has the blue car in the front.
Yeah, and the Finders Keepers book, but I don't know why they do. But now he's kind of getting back to old form. His old form, I think, a little bit.
If you guys have read all the stories from You Like It Darker, the rattlesnake story that was allegedly a
Cujo sequel,
which it wasn't really, but there's kind of a hint that there might be another Duma Key story coming in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the end of it, yeah,
that'd be interesting.
I read Duma Key, but I know I picked up on that.
He's been hinting a lot about
more Dark Tower.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure that's a definite. He's done more than hint at that, I think. So
yeah,
looking forward to it.
Please just shoot that straight into my veins.
Yes, please. I'm curious what it would be. I don't want to say anything because I don't want to spoil, but
well, he said it was going to be between. Oh, God,
is it going to be between? Okay,
between like books 4 and 5, I think I can't remember, but yeah, it's going to be in the middle, like a sub. Okay,
so another wind through the keyhole.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
that's what it sounded like.
That's fine. I'm good with that.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Better than another Holly story. Oops, did I say that out loud?
Well, that's what I think he's got another one. Like Holly, the Holly book just came out. And he's got another one. He really likes that character.
I know.
I like her. I haven't read the new one, but I did like her in the Mr. Mercedes, and I liked her in The Outsider too.
I liked her all the way through until the new one. The new one is just it's all, hating on people that were anti-COVID and stuff, which I agree with, but I don't want to read 500 pages of it.
It's pretty political, social.
Not only that, Philip, but it's like who the villain is up front, and the fate of the missing character up front. So there's literally like no suspense. It's almost like you just got to wait for Holly to figure it out, but we already know the answer.
Yeah, it was a bit of almost more like a thriller than a horror.
It wasn't great for me.
Well, someone just said in the chat about maybe doing a new Talisman book also.
Yeah, I think he said that he hinted at that on the Talking Scared podcast.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, so
he's an up and comer.
Talisman is one of my favorite.
Yeah,
books, so
he may have a future.
He's still learning the ropes. He's still learning the ropes, guys.
Yeah.
He is. Yeah, I think he's got a shot.
Yeah.
I'm still holding out for that Jordy Verrill prequel.
You would be.
I am. What happened before the meteor shit? That's what I need to know.
Things to think about. We cannot thank you guys enough for wanting to be part of this this evening with us and agreeing. I don't know how Aaron blackmailed all of you, or maybe just Tom and you got everybody else on board, but the rack is what we're talking about. It's a star-studded lineup, right? I mean, Brad, I think we've had most of these people on the shows with us. So.
I mean, Stevie King's been on a couple times, but yeah,
right.
Sure.
I mean, best friends with Laurel Hightower, so yeah.
You've got Max Booth III, Krista Carmen, Clayton McCall Chapman, Richard Chismar, Johnny Compton, Kristen Dearborn, Philip Fracassi, Laurel Hightower, Larry Hinkle, Gwendolyn Keist, Ronald Malfi, Bridget Nelson, Candice Nola, Eric. How do you say his last name? Nunali. Cynthia Palaio, Rebecca Rowland, Jeff Strand, Steve Van Samson, and Mercedes Yardley. So yeah, it's an all-star cast in this.
Yeah. So definitely
it's a fun, it's fun. Tom was saying earlier when we opened that there wasn't a strong, there wasn't a tight theme, a narrow theme to it. And I actually enjoyed the broader, like more of a vibe book versus, I mean, it's a challenge and a good way to maybe write to something very specific. I wrote a story. One of the first anthology I was ever in was called Giraffes on the Moon. And the prompt was literally you had to write a story about giraffes on the moon. And it was and I just started writing horror, but it was really interesting to do something to try and find an angle, to try and find something unique to say about something so specific. But I do enjoy what I liked about the rack was that it was just sort of like we're going for a kind of a general vibe, and it gives you a little more freedom as a writer to kind of explore.
I meant to touch on that earlier too, because sometimes I've read anthologies where there's a theme, and each story after each story is basically the same thing. But this one was such a general, broad theme. You got everything. I mean, it's like nostalgic from beginning to end. So
it's just a vibe to the whole thing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I like writing for anthologies, Brian. I just don't love reading them.
Yeah.
At least when if he's in it, he can't read it.
I don't think I've read I think I've been in probably a dozen anthologies, and I don't think I've read any of them. and I say that I feel terrible about it now that I'm thinking about it.
Philip, I'm the same way. All the short stories that I have that have been in anthologies, I don't think I've ever read any of the other stories, which I feel terrible about. But
I'm going to go look for every TOC that we've shared, Tom.
Hey, you're in trouble. You're in trouble now, Tom.
I knew I was going to get in trouble by the end of the night.
That's Stoker. That's Stoker's coming for your head.
Story?
No,
I mean,
you better watch out.
There are some I've been in that I haven't read, but like I was in the October Screams one. Philip was in that. That was all the Halloween. I read every story in that. I mean, that book was fantastic. But a lot of them I'm in. I'm like, I'm in it. That's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think it comes down. I think Mercedes touched on this. It just I have so little time to read, and I love reading. It's like besides writing, it's the thing I love most in the world to do. So, and I just have such little time to do it. And when I do, you get a lot of requests for blurbs and to read, and people, you get a stack of novels and to read to try and. You want to try and pay it forward and help other writers out. So you try and do as many of those as you can. But yeah, there's not that much time to read. So the idea of sitting down and reading like a collection of stories just seems kind of like bizarre to me. I don't know. I couldn't imagine having that that much time. But I think I'm going to make a point from now on to try and read more of the anthologies that I mentioned.
But the
start with the
watching.
Rack.
Yeah, the people watching and listening.
I have a copy right here above my desk. I am going to start
Perfect.
with
the people watching and listening. They should make time to read this anthology.
Read this one. Yeah, it's good. There's not a weak story in here. They're all really well written. They're all really good. Tom, you put together an excellent anthology.
Thank you very much.
We're ready for part
Thanks
two.
for having me.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, ready for part 2. All right, guys, get out here, enjoy your Friday night. Hopefully, we didn't.
Is it Saturday night already?
Yeah.
Shit.
Saturday? I don't know what day of the week it is, honestly. So. Thanks everyone for joining us. We really
Thank you very much.
appreciate it. The
Well,
rack,
thanks a
pick it
lot,
up.
guys. This was
This is a lot of fun. Thank you guys.
Yeah,
Thank
definitely
you
go
very
pick it
much.
up. It's awesome.
Thanks,
Guys,
everyone.
We'll try to have you
Appreciate
guys back for your next stuff.
Definitely.
Let's do it.
All right. For those in chat, thanks so much for stopping by. Later.
Love you, Jay.